I was raised to believe that strength decides everything, that history is written by those who refuse to bow, that if you want to protect your people, you must be harder than the world that threatens them. For a long time, I believed leadership was only about force, discipline, and resistance. I believed that change comes from the outside, from removing enemies, breaking systems, and confronting oppression head-on. But there comes a moment in a man's life when silence becomes louder than speeches, when victory feels incomplete, when power alone no longer answers the questions that keep you awake at night. That moment came to me quietly, not through politics, not through pressure, but through a verse of the Qur'an. It said, "Indeed, Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves." Those words didn't attack me. They didn't flatter me. They didn't try to impress me. They challenged me. I realized something uncomfortable in that moment. I had been focused on changing the world around me, but I had not asked myself whether I was willing to change what was inside me. We talk a lot about broken systems, but we rarely talk about broken intentions. We talk about corruption in governments, but we stay silent about corruption of the heart, arrogance, anger, pride, and obsession with control. That verse forced me to look inward. It made me ask questions no crowd can answer for you. Am I seeking justice, or am I seeking dominance? Am I serving my people, or am I feeding my ego? If power were taken from me today, would my principles remain? The Qur'an does something powerful. It does not romanticize leadership. It warns leaders. It reminds you that authority is not ownership. It is responsibility. Another verse stayed with me, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, He is sufficient for them. This was not a call to weakness. It was a call to clarity. True strength is not panic. True strength is not fear masked as aggression. True strength is standing firm without losing your soul. Islam taught me that patience is not surrender. It is discipline under pressure. That justice is not selective. That if you demand fairness, you must apply it even when it costs you personally. Then I read, "Stand firmly for justice, even if it is against yourselves." That verse is heavy because it leaves no room for excuses. It does not say justice when it benefits you. It does not say justice when the world is watching. It says justice, even against yourself. That is a standard few leaders are prepared to live by. I began to understand why Islam has survived centuries of oppression, distortion, and attack. It is not held together by buildings or borders. It is held together by accountability, by the belief that no human being is above moral law. The Quran does not divide humanity by race, wealth, or nationality. It strips all that away and asks one question. What kind of person are you when no one is watching? I reflected on another verse. The most honorable of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous, not the richest, not the loudest, not the most powerful character. That realization changed how I view leadership. It reminded me that revolutions fail when they replace one injustice with another. That power without ethics eventually destroys the very people it claims to protect. Islam did not tell me to abandon the world. It told me not to lose myself to it. It taught me that anger must be controlled, not worshipped. That resistance must be principled, not blind. That victory without morality is only a delayed defeat. That single Quranic verse changed how I see struggle, responsibility, and change itself. Because real change does not begin with weapons. It does not begin with speeches. It begins with the courage to confront yourself. And when the inside changes, history follows. When I truly sat with those words, I understood something that power never taught me. You can command an army, control a government, or shape a nation's direction. But if you cannot govern your own intentions, everything you build stands on unstable ground. The Quran does not flatter leaders. It humbles them. It reminded me that every decision leaves a trace, that every order affects real lives, families, children, futures. That leadership is not measured by how feared you are, but by how responsibly you carry the weight placed on your shoulders. Another verse echoed in my mind again and again. Every soul will be held accountable for what it has earned. There are no exemptions in that statement, no titles, no uniforms, no history lessons to hide behind. Accountability is universal. That realization forced me to confront a hard truth. Many leaders speak about justice while quietly making peace with injustice when it benefits them. Many talk about sacrifice but expect others to carry the burden. Many demand loyalty but forget that loyalty is first owed to truth. Islam did not allow me that comfort. It asked me to be consistent, publicly and privately. I began to see that the strength Islam produces is not loud. It is controlled. It is disciplined. It is rooted in restraint, the ability to stop yourself when your power allows you to go too far. The Qur'an speaks often about restraint, because history shows us that most destruction does not come from weakness. It comes from unchecked strength. I reflected on this verse. Allah loves those who are just, not those who win at any cost, not those who dominate, those who are just. That single line redefined victory for me. I realized that a nation does not collapse when it loses battles. It collapses when it loses moral direction, when lies become strategy, when fear replaces principle, when leaders stop listening and start protecting their image instead of their people. Islam taught me that humility is not humiliation. It is awareness. Awareness of your limits. Awareness of your responsibility. Awareness that power is temporary, but consequences are not. There is a verse that struck me deeply during this reflection. And do not let hatred of a people cause you to be unjust. That verse is dangerous, in the best way, because it removes excuses. It does not care how justified your anger feels. It does not care how loud the world supports you. It draws a line and says, injustice is still injustice, even when you believe you are right. That level of moral discipline is rare in political thinking, and that is exactly why it survives. Islam does not build followers who react emotionally. It builds individuals who respond consciously. I understood then why so many movements collapse after gaining power. They defeat their enemies but fail to defeat their ego. They remove one injustice only to replace it with another. The Qur'an does not allow that cycle to go unnoticed. It reminds you that power is a test, not a reward, a test of patience, a test of sincerity, a test of whether you will serve the people or use them. This understanding changed how I view struggle itself. Struggle is not only against external oppression, it is against the temptation to become what you claim to fight. Islam teaches that the greatest struggle is not always visible. It is internal, silent, continuous. And that struggle never ends. I will not pretend that reflection alone solves everything. The world is complex. Oppression is real. Resistance is sometimes necessary. But Islam adds something essential to resistance. Limits. Limits that protect humanity. Limits that protect innocence. Limits that protect the soul of a nation. That Qur'anic verse did not weaken my resolve. It sharpened it. It removed confusion. It stripped away emotional noise and replaced it with clarity. Because when you know why you stand, you no longer need to shout. And when your principles are firm, you do not need to fear the future. That is what changed me. Not a slogan. Not applause. Not power, but a reminder that real change begins within, and that leadership without inner accountability is only temporary authority. I began to understand something that history often hides. The fall of nations rarely begins with invasion. It begins with arrogance, with leaders who stop listening, with people who stop questioning themselves. The Qur'an repeatedly warns against this state, not in abstract language, but with painful clarity. It shows how civilizations before us collapsed, not because they lacked strength, but because they lost moral balance. That realization unsettled me, because it meant that the greatest threat to any nation is not always an enemy at the border. Sometimes it is the comfort of believing you are always right. Islam does not allow that comfort. It forces self-examination. Constantly, I found myself thinking about another verse, and do not walk on the earth with arrogance. Those words may sound simple, but they are heavy for anyone in authority. Power naturally tempts you to believe you are above consequences, above criticism, above correction. The Qur'an cuts through that illusion without apology. It reminded me that humility is not weakness. It is protection. Protection from repeating the same mistakes that destroyed those before us. I began to see leadership not as a position, but as a trust. A temporary trust that can be taken away at any moment. History is full of powerful men who believed they were permanent until they weren't. Islam keeps reminding you of that impermanence. It tells you that no matter how high you rise, you remain accountable. No matter how loud your name becomes, it will eventually fade. What remains is the record of your actions. That perspective changes how you think about decisions. It makes you slow down. It makes you listen more carefully. It makes you question your own motivations. I realize that many leaders fear losing power more than they fear losing integrity. But Islam flips that priority. It teaches that integrity is what gives power meaning in the first place. Without it, authority is just organized force. Another verse stayed with me during this time. Allah commands justice, excellence, and giving to others. Justice alone is difficult. Excellence raises the standard even higher. It means doing what is right even when it is not required, even when no one demands it, even when it brings no applause. That is the kind of discipline Islam demands. Not blind obedience, but conscious responsibility. I began to understand why Islam produces individuals who can endure pressure without breaking. It trains the mind to remain steady when emotions demand reaction. It teaches you to pause, to think before acting. That pause is powerful. In leadership, a single impulsive decision can undo years of sacrifice. A single unjust act can erase trust that took generations to build. Islam does not deny human emotion. It organizes it. It does not deny anger. It disciplines it. It does not deny ambition. It purifies it. It does not deny struggle. It gives it direction. The more I reflected, the clearer it became that this was not about adopting an identity. It was about understanding a framework that demands internal order before external change. Because when leaders lack inner order, chaos eventually reaches the people. I also reflected on how Islam speaks about patience, not as waiting but as endurance with purpose, as the ability to remain principled while time tests you. That kind of patience is rare, but it is necessary. Nations are not rebuilt in moments of excitement. They are rebuilt in long seasons of discipline, restraint, and consistency. The Qur'an does not promise easy victory. It promises meaning, and meaning sustains people when conditions do not improve immediately, when sacrifices are required, when progress is slow. That understanding reshaped how I view struggle itself. Struggle is not proof of failure. Sometimes it is proof that something important is being protected. Islam does not glorify suffering, but it gives it context. It teaches that dignity is not determined by comfort, but by conduct. That even under pressure you remain responsible for your choices. This reflection forced me to ask myself another difficult question. If I demand patience from my people, do I show patience myself? If I demand sacrifice, do I carry my share of the burden? Islam does not allow leaders to separate themselves from the people they lead. It pulls you back into accountability. That is why these verses stayed with me. They were not comforting, they were grounding. They removed illusions and replaced them with responsibility. I stopped looking at the Qur'an as something distant or theoretical. I began to see it as a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable because they do not argue with you. They simply show you what is there. One verse in particular kept returning to my mind, and do not betray the trust that has been placed in you. That word carries weight. Leadership is nothing without trust. A uniform does not create it. A title does not guarantee it. Trust is built quietly, through consistency, restraint, and honesty, and it is destroyed very quickly. Islam does not treat trust lightly. It treats it as sacred. I realize that when people place their hopes in a leader, they are not just trusting decisions. They are trusting intentions. They are trusting that power will not be used to satisfy personal desires, settle personal scores, or protect personal comfort. That realization forced me to slow down. It forced me to recognize that urgency must never replace wisdom. That speed without direction leads nowhere. That reacting emotionally, even with good intentions, can produce long-term damage. The Qur'an constantly reminds you to think beyond the moment. It reminds you that short-term victories can produce long-term harm if they are not guided by principle. That success achieved without ethics eventually turns into regret. Another verse struck me deeply during this reflection. Do not let your anger lead you away from justice. Anger is powerful. Anger can motivate resistance, but anger can also blind judgment. Islam does not ask leaders to be emotionless. It asks them to be disciplined, to recognize anger without surrendering to it. That discipline is difficult, especially in a world that rewards outrage and impulsive decisions.